The alarm clock screamed at 4:30 a.m. just like it did every morning. Lisa rolled out of bed, her body aching from yesterday's double shift. The tiny apartment was dark and cold. She could hear her mother coughing in the next room through the thin walls. That cough had been getting worse for months now. Lisa tiptoed to the kitchen and started making coffee with the cheap instant powder they could afford. The smell filled the small space, mixing with the scent of old paint and dampness that never seemed to go away. She looked at the stack of bills on the counter and her stomach twisted into knots. Electric bill, rent, medicine for her mother, food money for her little brother Tony. Everything was due and they barely had enough. She grabbed her work uniform from the back of a chair. The black pants and white shirt were wrinkled but clean. At least she had learned to iron them properly after getting scolded by her manager on her first week. The fancy restaurant where she worked had strict rules about appearance. Everything had to be perfect for their rich customers. Tony stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. At 15, he was all arms and legs, growing so fast that his clothes never seemed to fit right. "Morning, Lisa," he mumbled, opening the nearly empty refrigerator. "There's cereal in the cabinet," she said, pulling her hair back into a neat ponytail. "And don't forget your math homework. Mrs. Peterson said you missed turning it in twice this week." Tony made a face. "Math is stupid. When am I ever going to use algebra in real life?" Lisa stopped what she was doing and looked at her brother seriously. "Education is the only way out of this place, Tony. Trust me on that one." She thought about her own high school days when she used to sing in the choir. Her music teacher, Mr. Davies, had told her she had real talent. He had even helped her apply for a scholarship to study music at the state university. But then their father died in a construction accident and everything changed overnight. The scholarship money wasn't enough to cover living expenses for the whole family. Lisa had to choose between following her dreams and keeping her family together. The choice was easy, even though it broke her heart. She gave up her spot at the university and took the first job she could find. That was 6 years ago. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime. Lisa kissed Tony on the forehead and grabbed her purse. "I'll be home late tonight. There's leftover soup in the fridge for dinner. Make sure Mom takes her medicine at 8, okay?" The bus ride to work took 45 minutes through the city. Lisa watched the neighborhoods change through the dirty windows. The rundown apartments and small shops of her area slowly gave way to tree-lined streets and big houses. By the time she reached her stop, she was in a completely different world. The Grandview restaurant sat on the corner of the most expensive street in town. The building was old but beautiful, with large windows and fancy decorations. Inside, everything was elegant and expensive. The tablecloths were made of real linen, the silverware was heavy and shiny, and fresh flowers decorated every table. Lisa changed into her work shoes in the employee break room. The other servers were already there, getting ready for the lunch shift. Most of them were college students who worked part-time for extra money. They talked about weekend parties and upcoming exams while Lisa quietly tied her apron. "Good morning, Lisa," said Jessica, one of the younger servers. "You look tired. Everything okay?" "Just didn't sleep well," Lisa replied with a smile. She didn't like to talk about her problems at work. These kids had enough to worry about with their studies. The lunch crowd at Grandview was always interesting. Businessmen in expensive suits would have long meetings over wine and steak. Well-dressed women would spend 2 hours picking at tiny salads while gossiping about their neighbors. Everyone spoke in quiet, polite voices and expected perfect service. Lisa had learned to move like a ghost through the dining room. She could refill water glasses, take orders, and clear plates without the customers even noticing she was there. That's how they liked it. Invisible service. But sometimes she would catch pieces of conversations that made her stomach turn. Customers complaining about their housekeepers or talking about buying third vacation homes while she struggled to pay rent. They lived in a world where money was no object, where problems could be solved with a phone call or a credit card. During her lunch break, Lisa sat in the small employee courtyard behind the restaurant. She pulled out her phone and called to check on her mother. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" she asked when her mother answered. "Oh, you know, the same as always," her mother replied. But Lisa could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "The doctor wants me to get more tests done, but the insurance won't cover them." Lisa closed her eyes. More medical bills they couldn't afford. "Don't worry about it, Mom. We'll figure something out." After the call, Lisa sat quietly for a few minutes. Sometimes, when no one was around, she would hum softly to herself. Old songs from her high school choir days would come back to her without warning. She remembered the feeling of standing on stage, her voice filling the auditorium, the audience completely silent and focused on her performance. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now. The afternoon shift was busier than usual. A group of wealthy women was having some kind of charity meeting in the private dining room. Lisa could hear them through the doors talking about fundraising and guest lists for their upcoming event. Their voices were confident and commanding, the voices of people who were used to getting what they wanted. One of the women, Mrs. Wellington, was particularly demanding. She sent back her soup twice because it wasn't hot enough, and she made Lisa rearrange the flower centerpiece 3 times. But Lisa smiled and nodded, saying, "Of course, ma'am, and right away, ma'am," because she needed this job. Near the end of her shift, Lisa was cleaning tables when she overheard 2 customers talking about the opera they had seen the night before. They were discussing the singer's technique and how much emotion she had put into her performance. The way she hit those high notes in the final aria, one of them said, "It gave me chills." Lisa found herself slowing down her cleaning so she could listen. She remembered those same arias from her high school music class. She used to practice them in the empty auditorium after school, dreaming of performing them on a real stage someday. But dreams were for people who could afford them. Lisa had learned that lesson the hard way. As she finished her shift and prepared to go home, Lisa looked around the beautiful restaurant one more time. The customers were finishing their expensive meals, laughing and talking without a care in the world. None of them knew that their quiet server had once dreamed of performing on stages around the world. The bus ride home seemed longer than usual. By the time Lisa walked through her apartment door, she was exhausted. Tony was doing homework at the kitchen table, and their mother was asleep on the couch with the television on low volume. Lisa made herself a simple dinner and sat down with Tony to help him with his math homework. As they worked through algebra problems together, she couldn't help but think about the different worlds she moved between every day. In a few hours, she would get up and do it all over again. The phone call came at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Lisa was already awake, getting ready for another day at the restaurant, when her manager called with news that would change everything. "Lisa, I need you to work a double shift on Saturday," Mr. Rodriguez said without even saying hello first. "We're hosting the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala, and I need all my best servers there." Lisa's heart sank. She had promised Tony she would go to his basketball game on Saturday afternoon. He had been talking about it all week, excited because college scouts might be there to watch the players. But she couldn't afford to turn down extra work. "Of course, Mr. Rodriguez, what time should I be there?" 10 in the morning for setup, and the event runs until midnight. It's going to be our biggest night of the year." After hanging up, Lisa sat on her bed and stared at the wall. She would have to break another promise to her little brother. The guilt felt heavy in her chest, but the extra money from working the gala would help pay for their mother's upcoming doctor visit. Saturday morning arrived gray and cloudy. Lisa took the early bus to work, watching the city wake up through the window. The Grandview restaurant looked different in the morning light. Workers were already setting up decorations outside, hanging elegant banners and arranging flowers along the entrance. Inside, the restaurant had been transformed overnight. The regular tables were gone, replaced by round tables covered in white linen and decorated with tall centerpieces of white roses and gold ribbons. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandeliers, and the entire place smelled like expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Lisa joined the other servers in the break room for a special briefing. Mr. Rodriguez stood at the front, looking more nervous than she had ever seen him. "Tonight, we will be serving some of the most important people in the city," he began. "The mayor will be here, along with several city council members, the heads of major corporations, and many celebrities. This event raises money for the new children's hospital wing, so everything must be perfect." He handed out special name tags with their pictures on them. Security would be tight all evening. Lisa clipped hers to her uniform and listened as Mr. Rodriguez continued. "The evening's schedule includes a cocktail hour, dinner service, and then the main entertainment. We have Valentina Rossi flying in from New York. She's one of the most famous opera singers in the world, and her performance fee alone is $50,000. Lisa's eyes widened. $50,000 for one performance? That was more money than her family saw in 2 years. Remember, Mr. Rodriguez continued, these guests are used to the finest service. They should never have to ask for anything twice. Their water glasses should never be empty, and their every need should be anticipated. The morning flew by in a blur of preparation. Lisa helped arrange place settings, fold napkins into perfect shapes, and polish already spotless silverware. The kitchen staff worked like machines, preparing elaborate dishes that most of the servers couldn't even pronounce. By late afternoon, the first guests began arriving. Lisa watched through the kitchen doors as luxury cars pulled up outside. Drivers in uniforms opened doors for women in designer gowns and men in expensive tuxedos. Everything about these people screamed wealth and privilege. Mrs. Wellington arrived in a black limousine, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Lisa's yearly rent. She swept into the restaurant like she owned the place, immediately beginning to give orders to the event staff. The centerpieces are too tall, she announced to no one in particular. How are people supposed to have conversations across the table? And why are the programs not in alphabetical order? This is completely unprofessional. Lisa watched as workers scrambled to fix problems that weren't really problems. Mrs. Wellington seemed to enjoy the power of making people rush around to satisfy her demands. The cocktail hour began at 6 o'clock. Lisa circulated through the crowd with trays of fancy appetizers that cost more per piece than most people spent on entire meals. The guests talked and laughed, air-kissing each other and comparing jewelry. She overheard conversations about vacation homes in Europe, yacht parties and charity auctions where people spent thousands of dollars on items they didn't even want. One woman complained loudly about how hard it was to find good help for her summer house, while another discussed firing her personal trainer because he was 5 minutes late to their session. "Excuse me, miss," a man in a perfectly tailored suit called out to Lisa. "This champagne is warm. Bring me something properly chilled." Lisa took the glass with a polite smile. "Right away, sir." As she walked back to the kitchen, she noticed the man didn't even look at her face. To him, she was just a pair of hands delivering drinks. She could have been anyone or no one at all. The dinner service was even more intense. Each table received multiple courses of tiny artistic portions that looked more like paintings than food. Lisa learned to approach each table quietly. Serve from the left, clear from the right, and never interrupt the conversations of people who were clearly more important than she was. At table 12, a group of businessmen discussed a deal worth millions of dollars while barely touching their food. At table 7, several women planned a charity auction for next month, casually mentioning items worth more than most people's cars. But it was table 3 that really caught Lisa's attention. A group of elderly women were discussing the evening's entertainment with obvious excitement. "I've been waiting years to hear Valentina Rossi perform live," one of them said. "Her recording of La Bohème made me cry for hours." "The acoustics in this room should be perfect for her voice," another added. "I heard she insisted on a special sound system being installed just for tonight." Lisa felt a familiar pang in her chest. She remembered listening to recordings of famous opera singers when she was in high school, dreaming of performing those same beautiful arias someday. She used to imagine herself in a gorgeous gown, standing center stage while hundreds of people listened in complete silence. Those dreams felt foolish now. She was 24 years old, serving dinner to people who lived in a completely different world. Her voice was something she only used to sing lullabies to Tony when he had nightmares, or to hum quietly while doing dishes late at night. The meal service continued for over 2 hours. Each course was perfectly timed, each wine pairing carefully selected. The guests seemed to barely notice the army of servers moving silently around them, making sure every detail was perfect. Near the end of dinner, Lisa was refilling water glasses when she heard Mrs. Wellington talking to the event coordinator. "Where is Valentina? She should have arrived by now." "The performance is supposed to start in 30 minutes. The coordinator looked nervous. "She's running a little late, but her assistant confirmed she's on her way. Traffic from the airport, you know." Mrs. Wellington's face showed her displeasure. "This is completely unacceptable. These people paid premium prices for their tickets, and they expect to see world-class entertainment. If she's not here in 15 minutes, I want backup options ready." Lisa continued her work, but she couldn't help feeling excited about hearing a real opera performance. Even if she was working, maybe she could listen from the kitchen between tasks. It would be the closest she had come to live opera since her high school days. The dining room buzzed with anticipation as dessert was served. Guests kept checking their watches and looking toward the small stage that had been set up near the windows. The evening had cost each of them hundreds of dollars, and they clearly expected their money's worth. Lisa cleared the last dinner plates and prepared for what she thought would be the highlight of the evening. She had no idea that in just a few minutes everything would change in a way she could never have imagined. The guests finished their desserts and coffee, settling back in their chairs with expectant smiles. Outside, the city lights twinkled through the large windows, creating a perfect backdrop for what should have been an unforgettable performance. But Valentina Rossi was still nowhere to be found. At exactly 9:15 p.m., just as the dessert service was finishing, Mr. Rodriguez's phone rang. Lisa watched from across the dining room as his face went pale while he listened to whoever was calling. He stepped away from the crowd, speaking in urgent whispers that she couldn't hear. The guests were getting restless. People kept checking their expensive watches and looking toward the empty stage. Mrs. Wellington was pacing near the kitchen doors, her fancy heels clicking loudly on the polished floor. Every few minutes, she would grab a staff member and demand updates that no one could give her. "Where is she?" Mrs. Wellington snapped at the event coordinator. "The performance was supposed to start 10 minutes ago. These people didn't pay $500 per ticket to sit around drinking coffee all night." Lisa was clearing the last of the dessert plates when she saw Mr. Rodriguez hurrying toward Mrs. Wellington, with a look of pure panic on his face. She slowed down her work so she could hear their conversation without being obvious about it. "Ma'am, I just received a call from the hospital," Mr. Rodriguez said quietly. "Ms. Rossi is in the emergency room. She had a severe allergic reaction to something in her pre-performance meal at the hotel." Mrs. Wellington's face turned red. "What do you mean allergic reaction? To what?" "Apparently, she ate some kind of seafood that triggered her allergy. Her throat is swollen and she can't speak, let alone sing. The doctors say she'll be fine, but there's no way she can perform tonight." The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa could practically see Mrs. Wellington's mind racing as she processed this disaster. Around the dining room, guests were starting to notice that something was wrong. Conversations were getting quieter as people strained to hear what was happening. "This cannot be happening," Mrs. Wellington said through gritted teeth. "Do you understand what this means? We have 300 of the most influential people in the city sitting in this room. The mayor is here. The governor's wife is here. These people donated serious money to this charity, based on the promise of hearing Valentina Rossi perform." Mr. Rodriguez wiped sweat from his forehead with a napkin. "I know, ma'am. I'm trying to think of solutions. Maybe we could find another performer, or perhaps we could reschedule." "Reschedule?" Mrs. Wellington's voice rose dangerously. "You think we can just ask the mayor to come back next weekend? You think these people will donate the same amount of money to hear some local singer from the community theater?" Lisa pretended to organize silverware at a nearby serving station while she listened. Her heart was beating fast, though she wasn't sure why. This wasn't her problem to solve, but something about the panic in the room was making her nervous. Mrs. Wellington pulled out her phone and started making frantic calls. "Hello, this is Catherine Wellington. I need to speak to your booking manager immediately. We have an emergency." Lisa watched as Mrs. Wellington made call after call, each one ending in disappointment. Local singers were already booked. Professional performers were out of town, and no one was available on such short notice for an event of this importance. Meanwhile, the guests were getting more vocal about their dissatisfaction. Lisa could hear complaints coming from different tables around the room. "Could have gone to the symphony tonight instead of this," one woman said loudly. The invitation specifically mentioned Valentina Rossi, a man added. "If they can't deliver what they promised, I want my donation back." The situation was getting worse by the minute. Some guests were already asking for their coats. Others were making their own phone calls, probably telling friends about the disaster at the Grandview restaurant. Lisa could see Mr. Rodriguez's career flashing before his eyes. The restaurant's reputation was built on delivering perfect events for the city's elite. If this night ended in disaster, word would spread quickly through their small circle of wealthy customers. The Grandview might never recover. Mrs. Wellington hung up her phone after another failed call and looked around the room desperately. "There has to be someone," she muttered. "Anyone with vocal training. A music student, a church choir member, someone who can at least get up there and sing something classical." That's when Lisa felt a strange flutter in her stomach. She thought about her high school music classes, the hours she had spent practicing arias in the empty auditorium. She remembered how Mr. Davies had told her she had a gift, how the scholarship committee had been impressed with her audition. But that was years ago. She was just a waitress now, someone who cleaned tables and served drinks to people who didn't even see her as a real person. The idea of getting up in front of this crowd was terrifying. Mrs. Wellington was still making calls, her voice getting more desperate with each conversation.
What do you mean you don't have anyone available?
This is an emergency. I'll pay double your usual rate. Lisa watched one of the kitchen staff approach Mr. Rodriguez with something that looked like concern. Sir, the young man said quietly. One of our servers mentioned that she used to sing in school. I don't know if it helps, but... Mr. Rodriguez looked confused. Which server? The kitchen worker pointed in Lisa's direction. Lisa. She was humming some classical piece while she was polishing glasses earlier. When I asked her about it, she said she used to study voice in high school. Lisa's heart stopped. She hadn't realized anyone was listening when she hummed to herself during the prep work. It was just something she did without thinking, a habit left over from her music school days. Mr. Rodriguez walked over to her with a look of desperate hope in his eyes. Lisa, is it true that you have vocal training? Lisa felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Every eye seemed to be on her, even though most of the guests didn't know what was happening yet. Well, yes, I studied voice in high school, but that was a long time ago and I'm not... What kind of pieces did you learn? Mr. Rodriguez interrupted. Opera, classical? Anything that might work for an audience like this? Lisa's mind raced. She remembered the arias she had practiced, the technique she had learned, the dreams she had buried. But performing for her high school class was completely different from singing for 300 wealthy strangers who expected perfection. I know some opera pieces, she said slowly. But Mr. Rodriguez, I haven't performed in years. I'm not a professional. These people are expecting someone like Valentina Rossi. Mrs. Wellington must have overheard the conversation because she suddenly appeared beside them. You can sing opera? She asked Lisa directly. Lisa felt overwhelmed by the attention. I mean, I used to, in school, but I'm just a server here. I'm not dressed for performing and I haven't practiced in... Can you sing Puccini? Mrs. Wellington interrupted. What about Verdi? Anything that would be appropriate for a charity gala? Lisa nodded slowly. Those were exactly the composers she had studied most intensively in high school. She probably still remembered the words to several arias, though she hadn't sung them in years. Mrs. Wellington looked back at the dining room, where the complaints were getting louder, and some guests were definitely preparing to leave. She was facing a choice between certain disaster and a risky gamble on an untrained waitress. How quickly could you prepare to perform? She asked Lisa. Lisa felt dizzy. This couldn't be happening. She was just trying to make it through another work shift so she could pay her bills and take care of her family. She wasn't prepared to become the emergency entertainment for the most important social event of the year. But as she looked around the room at the panic in Mr. Rodriguez's eyes and the desperation on Mrs. Wellington's face, she realized that sometimes life doesn't give you time to prepare. Sometimes you just have to take a deep breath and jump. Lisa stared at Mrs. Wellington, trying to process what was being asked of her. The wealthy woman's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the desperation in her eyes. Behind them, the dining room was getting more chaotic by the minute as guests realized something was seriously wrong. I don't know, Lisa stammered. It's been so long since I performed for anyone. And these people, they're expecting a world-class singer, not someone who... Someone who what? Mrs. Wellington asked sharply. Someone who works for a living? Let me tell you something, dear. Right now, you're the only option we have. Unless you'd prefer to watch this entire event collapse and probably take several jobs with it. The threat wasn't subtle, but Lisa could see it wasn't really meant to be cruel. Mrs. Wellington was panicking, and desperate people say desperate things. But the mention of jobs hit close to home. If this event was a disaster, the Grandview restaurant would suffer. And if the restaurant suffered, servers like Lisa would be the first to lose their jobs. Mr. Rodriguez stepped closer, his voice gentler than Mrs. Wellington's. Lisa, I know this is asking a lot, but you've been one of our most reliable employees for 3 years. If anyone can handle this pressure, it's you. Lisa looked around the room again. Some guests were already standing up, reaching for their purses and calling for their drivers. Others were checking their phones, probably posting on social media about the disappointment. The charity would lose thousands of dollars in donations, money that was supposed to help sick children get better medical care. What would I even sing? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Wellington's face lit up with the first sign of hope she'd shown all evening. Anything classical? Something beautiful and emotional that will make people forget about the inconvenience. You said you know Puccini? Lisa nodded slowly. I used to know O mio babbino caro pretty well. It's from Gianni Schicchi, but Mrs. Wellington, I'm wearing a work uniform. I haven't warmed up my voice. I don't even know if I can still hit the high notes. The uniform doesn't matter, Mrs. Wellington said quickly. Sometimes authentic is better than polished. As for your voice, we have about 10 minutes before people start leaving in large numbers. That should give you time to do whatever singers do to prepare. Lisa felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at a drop that could either kill her or teach her to fly. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was a terrible idea. She wasn't a performer anymore. She was a waitress who hummed while she worked and sang lullabies to her little brother. But then she thought about Tony, probably sitting at home right now, doing homework at their kitchen table. She thought about her mother, coughing in the next room while she worried about medical bills they couldn't afford. She thought about all the times she had watched wealthy people from the sidelines, serving their food and cleaning up their messes while they lived lives she could only dream about. Maybe this was her chance to step out of the shadows, even if it was just for a few minutes. Okay, she said, the word coming out before she could change her mind. I'll try. Mrs. Wellington actually smiled for the first time all evening. Wonderful. Mr. Rodriguez, can you make sure she has whatever she needs? I'm going to go make an announcement to keep people from leaving. As Mrs. Wellington walked away, Lisa suddenly felt like she might throw up. What had she just agreed to do? In a few minutes, she would be standing in front of 300 strangers, many of them famous and powerful, trying to sing opera like she was still the 17-year-old girl who had won her high school's music competition. Lisa, Mr. Rodriguez said gently, are you sure about this? I don't want to pressure you into something you're not comfortable with. Lisa appreciated his concern, but she knew it was too late to back out now. I'm terrified, she admitted. But I think that's normal, right? Even professional singers get nervous before they perform. She walked quickly to the employee bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her work uniform was clean but basic. Black pants, white shirt, simple black shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wasn't wearing any makeup except for a little mascara and lip gloss. She definitely didn't look like someone who belonged on a stage in front of the city's elite. But maybe that was okay. Maybe being real was better than being perfect. Lisa splashed some cold water on her face and took a few deep breaths. She started to do some of the vocal warm-ups she remembered from high school. Humming scales, lip trills, gentle stretches to relax her throat and shoulders. Her voice felt rusty at first, like an instrument that hadn't been played in years. But gradually the muscle memory started to come back. The breathing techniques, the posture, the way to support her voice from her diaphragm instead of straining her throat. She quietly sang through the first few lines of O mio babbino caro, testing her range and remembering the Italian words. The aria was about a young woman pleading with her father to let her marry the man she loves. It was emotional and beautiful, with a soaring melody that could bring people to tears when sung well. Lisa had always connected with this particular piece because it was about someone fighting for what they wanted, even when the odds were against them. The young woman in the opera was willing to risk everything for love. Tonight, Lisa was willing to risk everything for her family and maybe, just maybe, for herself. Through the bathroom door, she could hear Mrs. Wellington making an announcement to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I have an update about this evening's entertainment. Due to an unexpected medical emergency, Valentina Rossi will not be able to perform tonight. The disappointed murmurs that followed were loud enough to reach Lisa even in the bathroom. Her stomach churned as she realized that in a few minutes all those voices would be silent. Listening to her, Mrs. Wellington continued, however, we are fortunate to have discovered that one of the Grandview's own staff members has classical vocal training. She has graciously agreed to perform for us this evening, and I think you'll find her quite remarkable. Lisa dried her hands and walked back into the dining room, just as Mrs. Wellington finished her announcement. The reaction from the crowd was mixed. Some people seemed curious, others looked skeptical, and a few were clearly not pleased about the change in plans. A waitress? She heard one woman whisper loudly, "We paid premium prices to hear a real opera singer, not some amateur from the staff." "This is ridiculous," a man added. "I'm calling my driver," but other guests seemed more open to the idea. "How interesting," an elderly woman said to her companion. "I love discovering new talent. Sometimes the most surprising performances come from unexpected places." Mr. Rodriguez appeared at Lisa's side with a small microphone. "The sound system is all set up," he said quietly. "Just speak clearly and the whole room will be able to hear you." Lisa clipped the tiny microphone to her shirt collar, her hands shaking slightly. She could feel eyes on her from all around the room as people realized she was the emergency replacement they'd been told about. "You don't have to do this," Mr. Rodriguez whispered. "If you want to change your mind, we'll figure out something else." Lisa looked out at the crowd of expectant faces. Some were kind, some were skeptical, and some were clearly ready to judge her harshly. But among all those strangers, she imagined Tony and her mother, counting on her to keep their little family afloat. "No," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I'm ready." It was time to find out if the girl who used to sing in the high school auditorium was still somewhere inside the woman who served tables and counted tips. Lisa walked toward the small stage on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. The dining room, which had seemed elegant and welcoming when she was serving dinner, now felt enormous and intimidating. 300 pairs of eyes watched her every step, and she could hear whispered conversations following her path. "Is that really the waitress who was serving our table?" someone asked. "She's just a kid," another voice said. "This is going to be embarrassing." "I should have known this charity event would be amateur hour," a man complained loudly enough for Lisa to hear. Each comment felt like a small blow, but Lisa kept walking. Her server training had taught her to keep a pleasant expression even when customers were rude, and she used that skill now to hide the terror she was feeling inside. Mrs. Wellington met her at the edge of the stage with a forced smile that didn't quite hide her own nervousness. "Just remember," she whispered to Lisa, "these people want to be entertained. Give them something beautiful and they'll forgive anything." Lisa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She stepped up onto the small platform that had been set up near the windows, and suddenly she was above the crowd, looking down at faces that ranged from curious to skeptical to openly hostile. The microphone felt strange, clipped to her work shirt. She wasn't used to amplified sound, and when she cleared her throat, the small noise echoed through the room and made her jump. A few people in the audience chuckled, not necessarily in a mean way, but it made Lisa's cheeks burn with embarrassment. Mrs. Wellington stepped up to introduce her, but Lisa could see the uncertainty in the older woman's eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lisa, who will be performing for us this evening." That was it. No impressive biography, no list of accomplishments or prestigious schools. Just Lisa, who will be performing. Lisa realized that Mrs. Wellington didn't even know her last name, despite the fact that she had been serving food in this restaurant for 3 years. The applause that followed was polite but thin. Lisa could see people checking their watches and phones, probably calculating how long they needed to stay before they could politely leave. Some guests were still standing near the exits, clearly planning to make their escape as soon as this amateur performance proved to be as bad as they expected. Lisa stood alone on the stage in her simple work uniform, looking out at an audience dressed in designer gowns and expensive suits. The contrast couldn't have been more obvious. She was a working-class girl from the wrong side of town, about to attempt something that required years of professional training and experience. For a moment, she couldn't remember a single word of the aria she had planned to sing. Her mind went completely blank and panic started to rise in her chest. What was she doing here? These people were right to be skeptical. She was just a waitress who used to sing in high school. What made her think she could perform for an audience like this? Then she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, the way Mr. Davies had taught her years ago. "When you're nervous," he used to say, "remember why the music exists. It's not about impressing anyone. It's about sharing something beautiful with the world." Lisa thought about the aria she was about to sing. "O mio babino caro" was the plea of a young woman asking her father to understand her dreams, to let her choose her own path in life. In that moment, Lisa understood the song in a way she never had before. She opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. Instead of seeing judgment and skepticism, she tried to see people who might understand what it felt like to want something more than what life had given you. "Good evening," she said into the microphone, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know this isn't what you were expecting tonight. I'm not Valentina Rossi, and I'm not a professional singer. I'm someone who serves your food and clears your tables, and most of the time you probably don't even notice I'm here." The honesty in her voice seemed to catch the audience's attention. The restless movement in the room settled down, and people stopped checking their phones. "But tonight," Lisa continued, "I'd like to share something with you that's been part of my life since I was a teenager. This is an aria from Puccini's opera Gianni Schicchi. It's about a young woman who's asking her father to let her follow her heart, even when it seems impossible." She paused, gathering her courage for what she was about to do. "I understand if this isn't what you came here for, but sometimes life gives us unexpected moments, and maybe this is one of them." Lisa closed her eyes again and began to sing. The first notes came out shaky and uncertain. Her voice cracked slightly on the opening phrase, and she heard someone in the audience whisper, "Oh no, this is going to be terrible." But then something magical happened. As Lisa found her rhythm and remembered the techniques she had learned years ago, her voice began to strengthen. The shakiness disappeared, replaced by a clear, pure tone that filled the room like honey. She sang about love and hope and the courage to dream of something better. Every word of Italian that came from her lips carried with it years of working double shifts, of choosing duty over dreams, of loving a family so much that you'd sacrifice everything for them. The audience, which had been restless and distracted just moments before, began to fall silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phones were quietly put away. Even the servers who had been clearing tables in the background stopped what they were doing to listen. Lisa's voice grew stronger with each phrase. The high notes that she had worried about came easily now, soaring above the dining room with a beauty that surprised even her. She had forgotten how it felt to sing with her whole heart, to let music flow through her like water finding its natural course. As she sang, Lisa opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. The skeptical expressions were melting away, replaced by something she hadn't expected to see: genuine attention, and maybe even admiration. In the back of the room, she could see the kitchen staff gathered in the doorway, watching with amazement. These were people who worked alongside her every day, who knew her as someone who quietly did her job and never complained. Now they were seeing a side of her that she had kept hidden even from herself. But it wasn't just the staff who were paying attention. The wealthy guests who had barely acknowledged her existence when she was serving their dinner were now completely focused on her performance. Some were leaning forward in their chairs, others had their hands pressed to their hearts. Lisa could see Mrs. Wellington near the front of the room, and the older woman's carefully applied makeup was streaked with tears. As the aria reached its emotional climax, Lisa felt something she hadn't experienced in years: the pure joy of sharing music with other people. For these few minutes, she wasn't a struggling waitress worried about bills and medical expenses. She was an artist, creating something beautiful and meaningful. The last notes of the aria hung in the air like a prayer, and then there was silence. Complete, absolute silence. Lisa stood on the stage breathing hard, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake or created something wonderful. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Lisa stood on the small stage, her heart pounding so hard she was sure the microphone would pick it up. She had just poured her soul into that performance, and now she was waiting to find out if it had been enough or if she had just embarrassed herself in front of the most important people in the city. Then, somewhere in the back of the room, someone started to clap. It was slow at first, measured and thoughtful. Then another person joined in, and another. Within seconds, the entire dining room erupted in applause that was unlike anything Lisa had ever heard. It wasn't the polite, expected clapping that usually followed dinner entertainment. This was something raw and genuine, the sound of people who had been truly moved by what they had just experienced. People were standing up now, rising from their chairs with expressions of amazement on their faces. Lisa could see tears streaming down cheeks, men and women alike reaching for napkins to wipe their eyes. The elderly woman at table 7 was sobbing openly, her hands pressed to her heart. "Brava!" someone shouted from the crowd. "Brava!" Others picked up the call, and soon the room was filled with voices calling out appreciation in multiple languages. The applause continued, growing louder rather than fading away. as if the audience couldn't quite bring themselves to stop. Lisa felt overwhelmed by the response. She had hoped not to embarrass herself, but she had never imagined anything like this. She could see faces in the crowd that had looked at her with dismissal just minutes before, now shining with admiration and respect. Mrs. Wellington was making her way toward the stage, and Lisa could see that the perfectly composed socialite was crying without any concern for her makeup. When she reached the platform, she looked up at Lisa with an expression that was part amazement and part apology. "My dear," Mrs. Wellington said, her voice carrying through the microphone system, "that was absolutely extraordinary. In 30 years of organizing charity events, I have never heard anything so beautiful." The applause started again, even louder this time. Lisa looked out at the sea of faces and felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in years, she remembered what it felt like to be valued for something other than her ability to serve food and clean tables. Near the kitchen doors, she could see Mr. Rodriguez wiping tears from his eyes. The tough restaurant manager, who had probably seen thousands of performances in his career, was crying over something his waitress had just done. The other servers were clustered around him, all of them staring at Lisa like they had never seen her before. In the audience, people were turning to each other with excited conversations. Lisa could hear fragments of what they were saying, and it made her heart race. Where has she been hiding? That voice is incredible. She has better technique than half the performers I've heard at the opera house. Did you see the emotion in her face? She wasn't just singing, she was telling a story. A distinguished-looking man near the front stood up and called out, "Young lady, have you had professional training?" That performance was absolutely professional quality. Lisa felt a blush spread across her cheeks. "Just high school choir," she called back, her voice still amplified by the microphone. "I haven't performed in years." This answer seemed to amaze the audience even more. If she could sing like that with just high school training and years out of practice, what might she be capable of with proper instruction and regular performance opportunities? An elegant woman at table 12 stood up and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've just witnessed something very special. This young woman has a gift that shouldn't be wasted serving tables, no matter how well she does that job." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Lisa could see people nodding and whispering to each other, and she had the strange feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. Mrs. Wellington was still standing near the stage, and she raised her hand to get the room's attention. "I think we can all agree that this evening has turned out to be far more memorable than we originally planned. Sometimes the most beautiful surprises come from the most unexpected places." She turned to look at Lisa directly. "My dear, you have given us a gift tonight. You've reminded us that talent and beauty can be found anywhere, and that sometimes the most powerful performances come from the heart, rather than from years of expensive training." The applause started again, and this time Lisa felt tears starting to form in her own eyes. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, watching other people live the kinds of lives she could only dream about. Tonight, for just a few minutes, she had been the center of attention in the best possible way. As the clapping finally began to die down, Lisa saw a well-dressed man making his way toward the stage. He was probably in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit, and he moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone used to being important. "Excuse me," he said when he reached the stage. "I'm David Chen, and I represent several professional artists in the city. Could I possibly speak with you after the event? I think there might be some opportunities we should discuss." Lisa's eyes widened. A talent agent? Was he seriously suggesting that she might have professional opportunities as a singer? The idea seemed impossible, but here he was handing her a business card in front of 300 witnesses. Other people were approaching the stage now, each with their own business cards and suggestions. A woman who ran a local arts foundation wanted to discuss scholarship opportunities. A man who owned several restaurants was talking about regular performance gigs. Someone else mentioned connections at the city's opera company. Lisa felt like she was dreaming. An hour ago, she had been clearing dessert plates and worrying about her mother's medical bills. Now she was surrounded by people who saw her as an artist, as someone with real talent worth investing in. But the moment that meant the most came when she saw the kitchen staff pushing through the crowd to reach her. These were the people she worked with every day, who knew her as a quiet, reliable employee who never caused trouble or asked for special treatment. "Lisa," said Carlos, one of the line cooks, "we had no idea you could sing like that." "That was incredible." "You made us all so proud," added Jennifer, another server. "I got chills listening to you up there." Even Mr. Rodriguez had made his way over, and his usual stern expression had been replaced by something that looked like pride. "Lisa, in 20 years of restaurant management, I have never seen anything like what you just did. You saved this entire event, and you did it with more grace and talent than I've ever seen." As Lisa looked around at all the faces surrounding her, wealthy donors, fellow employees, talent agents, and charity organizers, she realized that something fundamental had changed. She was no longer just the invisible waitress who served food and cleaned tables. For the first time in years, people were seeing her for who she really was, and what they saw they liked. The evening was far from over, but Lisa already knew that her life would never be quite the same again. As the initial wave of applause died down, Lisa found herself surrounded by more people than she had ever spoken to in her entire life. Business cards were being pressed into her hands faster than she could read them, and everyone seemed to be talking at once. "You simply must audition for our spring concert series," said a woman with perfectly styled gray hair who introduced herself as the director of the city's cultural center. "Have you ever considered recording an album?" asked a man who claimed to own a music production company. "Our restaurant group is always looking for talented performers for our weekend dinner shows," added another businessman. Lisa felt overwhelmed by the attention. Just an hour ago, most of these people wouldn't have given her a second glance when she was refilling their water glasses. Now they were treating her like she was already a celebrity, someone whose time and talent were valuable commodities. Mrs. Wellington had somehow managed to restore order to the room, directing people back to their tables so the event could continue with the auction portion of the evening. But Lisa could see that the energy in the room had completely changed. People were animated and excited in a way they hadn't been during dinner. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Wellington announced, "I believe we can all agree that this evening has exceeded our expectations in the most wonderful way. Now let's channel this excitement into supporting our cause. The auction will begin in just a few minutes." But first she turned back to Lisa with a warm smile. "My dear, I owe you an enormous apology. When I first heard that our entertainment would be replaced by a staff member, I was less than enthusiastic. I was wrong, and I'm not too proud to admit it." Lisa felt a flush of gratitude toward the older woman. "Thank you, Mrs. Wellington. I know you took a big risk trusting me tonight." "The biggest risk would have been not giving you a chance," Mrs. Wellington replied. "You've reminded all of us that talent doesn't come with a price tag attached. It comes from the heart, and you have a very beautiful heart." As Lisa finally stepped down from the stage, she was immediately approached by David Chen, the talent agent who had handed her his business card earlier. Up close, she could see that he was even more well-dressed than she had initially thought, with an expensive watch and shoes that probably cost more than she made in a month. "Lisa," he said, "I hope you don't mind me being direct, but I've been in this business for 25 years and I recognize raw talent when I hear it. Have you ever seriously considered pursuing music as a career?" Lisa almost laughed at the question. "Mr. Chen, I work 2 jobs just to pay rent and take care of my family. I haven't had time to seriously consider anything except making sure we have enough money for groceries." His expression grew more serious. "I understand. But Lisa, what I heard tonight wasn't just good singing. It was the kind of authentic, emotional performance that can't be taught. You have something that music schools spend years trying to develop in their students, and you already have it naturally." He pulled out a leather portfolio and showed her some photographs of other performers he represented. Lisa recognized several of the faces from concert posters and music advertisements around the city. "I'm not saying it would be easy," David continued. "Building a music career takes time and dedication. But with the right guidance and opportunities, I believe you could be performing in major venues within a year or 2. Lisa felt dizzy at the suggestion. Major venues? She had trouble imagining herself performing anywhere bigger than the Grandview restaurant's dining room. "I have family responsibilities," she said carefully. "My mother is sick and my little brother is still in school. I can't just drop everything to chase a dream that might not work out." David nodded understandingly. "Of course. But what if we could structure things so that pursuing music actually helped you take better care of your family? Professional singers can make very good money, much more than you're earning now." Before Lisa could respond, she was approached by another woman who had been sitting at one of the front tables during her performance. She was probably in her 60s with kind eyes and an elegant but understated style. "Excuse me," the woman said. "I'm Dr. Patricia Hoffman. I run the Miller Foundation, which provides scholarships and career development for promising artists. I was wondering if you might be interested in discussing some opportunities." Lisa looked back and forth between the talent agent and the foundation director, feeling like she had stumbled into someone else's life. "I'm sorry, but this is all happening very fast. A few hours ago, I was just trying to get through my work shift." Dr. Hoffman smiled warmly. "I understand completely, but sometimes the universe puts opportunities in our path when we're ready for them, even if we don't realize we're ready." She handed Lisa an elegant business card with the foundation's logo embossed in gold. "Our foundation has helped launch the careers of several successful musicians over the years. We provide funding for training, performance opportunities, and career development. The only requirement is talent and dedication, both of which you clearly have." As Dr. Hoffman walked away to rejoin her table, Lisa looked down at the business card in her hand. The Miller Foundation had a reputation throughout the city for supporting emerging artists. She had read about some of their scholarship recipients in the newspaper over the years, always thinking of them as lucky people who lived in a completely different world from hers. The auction was beginning now, and Lisa could see that the energy from her performance was having a positive effect on the bidding. People were raising their paddles with enthusiasm, and the amounts being bid were higher than what Mrs. Wellington had probably expected. "The evening's unexpected entertainment seems to have put everyone in a generous mood," Mr. Rodriguez observed, appearing at Lisa's side with a glass of water. "The charity is going to raise significantly more money than they planned, partly because of what you did up there." Lisa sipped the water gratefully. Her throat felt dry from the performance and from all the talking she'd been doing since. "Mr. Rodriguez, what happens now? I mean, at work? Do I just go back to serving tables tomorrow like nothing happened?" Her manager looked thoughtful. "Lisa, I think you may find that tonight has opened doors you didn't even know existed. But whatever you decide to do, you'll always have a job here. You've been one of our best employees, and after tonight, you'll also be one of our proudest success stories." As the auction continued, Lisa found herself watching the proceedings with new eyes. These wealthy people were bidding thousands of dollars on art pieces and vacation packages, amounts that represented more money than her family saw in months. But tonight they had also been moved to tears by her performance, reminded that some of the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought. Near the end of the evening, as guests were beginning to say their goodbyes, Lisa was approached by one more person who would change everything. A young woman with a professional camera had been taking photos throughout the event, and she hurried over with an excited expression. "Hi, I'm Rebecca Martinez from the Arts and Culture section of the city newspaper. I was covering the charity event, but your performance has become the real story of the evening. Would you be willing to answer a few questions? I think our readers would love to know more about you." Lisa felt her heart skip. "A newspaper interview? I don't know what I would say. I'm not used to talking to reporters." "Just be yourself," Rebecca said with an encouraging smile. "That's clearly been working pretty well for you so far tonight." As Lisa looked around the dining room one more time, she saw faces that had been transformed by her music. People were still talking about her performance, still approaching Mrs. Wellington to ask about the amazing young singer who had saved the evening. Tomorrow, there would be newspaper articles and social media posts. There would be phone calls from the talent agent and the foundation director. There would be decisions to make about opportunities she had never imagined possible. But tonight, Lisa was still wearing her work uniform, still thinking about the bus ride home to her small apartment, where Tony was probably doing homework and her mother was probably coughing in her sleep. The question was, how do you hold on to who you are when the whole world suddenly wants to turn you into someone else? 3 weeks after the charity gala, Lisa sat in a coffee shop downtown, staring at her phone in disbelief. The video of her performance had gone viral overnight, shared by someone who had been at the event. In just a few days, it had been viewed over 2 million times, with comments pouring in from around the world. This gave me chills. Who is this amazing singer? I can't believe she's not professionally trained. What a voice. This is what real talent looks like. No fancy production, just pure emotion and skill. The newspaper article had been picked up by other media outlets, and suddenly Lisa's story was everywhere. Local television stations wanted interviews. Radio shows were calling, and her phone hadn't stopped ringing in days, but the most important call had come 3 days after the gala. Dr. Hoffman from the Miller Foundation had offered Lisa a full scholarship for voice training, with one of the city's most respected instructors, plus financial support to help her transition from restaurant work to pursuing music professionally. The foundation board was unanimous, Dr. Hoffman had explained during their meeting. Your performance demonstrated exactly the kind of raw talent and authentic artistry we look for. We want to invest in your future. Even more overwhelming was the offer from David Chen's agency. He had lined up a series of performance opportunities that would pay more in a month than Lisa currently made in 6 months at the restaurant. Concert halls, corporate events, and even an audition for the city's opera company. I've never seen public response like this to an unknown performer, David had told her honestly. People are drawn to your authenticity. In a world full of manufactured entertainment, you're the real thing. The hardest part had been making the decision to leave her job at the Grandview. Mr. Rodriguez had been incredibly supportive, even helping her arrange a flexible schedule so she could continue working part-time while she started her music training. You're doing the right thing, he had assured her. We'll miss you, but watching you waste your talent serving tables would have been a crime. Now, as Lisa sat in the coffee shop before her first official voice lesson, she thought about how much her life had changed in just 3 weeks. The biggest change was at home, where she had finally been able to take her mother to see a specialist without worrying about the cost. The treatment options look very promising, the doctor had explained. With proper medication and care, your mother should see significant improvement in her condition. Tony had been amazed by his sister's sudden fame. My friends keep showing me the video and asking if that's really my sister, he had told her with pride. I tell them you've always been able to sing like that, but nobody believed me. The scholarship money from the Miller Foundation meant Tony could stay in his current school and even think about college prep classes. For the first time in years, Lisa didn't have to worry about whether they could afford basic necessities. But success came with its own challenges. Lisa had to learn how to handle media attention, how to work with booking agents, and how to manage the business side of a music career. Some days she felt overwhelmed by the complexity of her new life. Remember, Dr. Hoffman had advised her, success doesn't mean you have to become a different person. The authenticity that moved people at the gala is your greatest asset. Don't let anyone convince you to change that. Lisa's first professional performance was scheduled for the following month at the city's premier concert hall. Tickets had sold out within hours of going on sale, with many people specifically mentioning that they wanted to hear the waitress with the incredible voice perform in a proper venue. The voice instructor Dr. Hoffman had recommended was a former opera singer named Professor Williams, who had trained performers at some of the world's most prestigious music schools. During their first meeting, she had been both encouraging and realistic about the work ahead. You have exceptional natural talent, Professor Williams had told her, but talent alone isn't enough for a sustained career. We need to strengthen your technique, expand your repertoire, and build your confidence as a performer. Are you prepared to work harder than you've ever worked before? Lisa had thought about all the double shifts at the restaurant, all the nights she'd stayed up late helping Tony with homework while worrying about bills. I think I can handle hard work, she had replied. Now as she walked into Professor Williams's studio for her first lesson, Lisa felt nervous but excited. The room was filled with music books, a beautiful grand piano, and framed photographs of famous singers who had studied there. Good morning, Lisa, Professor Williams said warmly. Are you ready to begin? As Lisa began her vocal warm-ups, she thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. Just a month ago, she had been invisible to most of the world, someone who cleaned tables and served food while dreaming of something more. The performance at the charity gala had lasted less than 5 minutes, but it had changed everything, not just because of the opportunities it had created, but because it had reminded her of who she really was underneath all the worry and responsibility. She was someone who could create beauty in the world. She was someone whose voice could move people to tears and inspire them to be more generous. She was someone with gifts worth sharing. The training would be intensive, the performance schedule demanding, and the pressure to succeed would be enormous. But for the first time in years, Lisa felt like she was moving towards something instead of just trying to survive each day. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Tony. Good luck at your lesson today. Can't wait to hear you sing at the concert hall next month. You're going to be amazing. Lisa smiled as she put her phone away and focused on the scales Professor Williams was playing on the piano. She had a lot to learn and a long way to go, but she was ready for the challenge. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with a single moment of courage. For Lisa, that moment had come when she stepped onto a small stage in her work uniform and decided to share her gift with the world. Now, as she filled the practice room with her voice, she knew that everything was about to change again, but this time she was ready for whatever came next. The waitress who had once served dinner to wealthy strangers was gone. In her place was an artist, ready to create music that would touch hearts and change lives. And this was only the beginning. 6 months later, Lisa would perform at Carnegie Hall. A year later, she would record her first album. But those were stories for another day. Today, she was simply a young woman with a beautiful voice and the courage to chase her dreams, no matter how impossible they had once seemed. In the end, that was the most important part of the story. Not the fame or the money or the newspaper articles, but the reminder that extraordinary things can happen when ordinary people find the courage to step into the light. Lisa had learned that talent without opportunity is just a hidden treasure. But when the right moment comes, when someone is brave enough to take a chance, magic can happen. And sometimes, that magic changes everything.